Let's say now start with lesson 7, which talking about double angle and half angle identities. In this lesson, we are going to verify and use the double angle identities and use the half and angle identities. Now, in the previous lesson, we talked about the angle sum identities and the angle difference identities. So the double angle and the half angle are the special cases from them. Let's start now with the double angle identities, and they are very, very important. You will use them in calculus next year, inshallah, and you will use them this year. Now, the double angle means like if theta is 30, so the double angle, which is 2 theta, will be 60. Now, in the previous lessons, we talk about how to find cosine of theta. In this lesson, we are going to learn how to find cosine of 2 theta. The identities are, for the cosine, the first one, cosine squared minus sine squared. The second one, 2 cosine squared minus 1. And the third one, 1 minus 2 sine squared. How to find sine 2 theta? It will be 2 sine theta cosine theta. And how to find tan 2 theta? It will be 2 tan theta of 1 minus tan squared of theta. So these are the double angle identities for cosine, sine, and tan. Now, let's here find or derive a double angle identities. One of them, I want now, or the most important one, or you can say the original one. It says that cosine 2 of theta, or 2 theta, is cosine squared minus sine squared. Now, from this identity, they derive 1 minus 2 sine squared of theta and 2 cosine squared of theta minus 1. So from this one, they bring the other two identities. Now let's see now here, how can we prove that cosine 2 theta is 1 minus 2 sine squared of theta? In order to prove it, let's remember one of the identities that we talked about it in the previous lessons, which is the Pythagorean identities. That says cosine squared of theta plus sine squared of theta equals 1. So remember, cosine squared plus sine squared equal 1. That's cosine squared minus sine squared equals cosine 2 theta. Now from here, we can write it as cosine squared of theta is 1 minus sine squared of theta. Let's now substitute it in our original equation. So cosine 2 of theta will be. Now let's here write, instead of writing cosine squared, write 1 minus sine squared of theta minus sine squared of theta. Then it will be 1 minus sine means 1 minus sine squared of theta. So from this, or from the original one that they have it, the mathematicians can have or can make a new identity, which are cosine 2 of theta is 1 minus 2 sine squared of theta. Is it clear?
Yes, teacher.
Yeah.
Now here, let's now find the third one. Oh, let's try to derive the third one. Cosine 2 of theta is 2 cosine squared of theta minus 1. The same as I did before. Let's remember the Pythagorean theorem. Cosine squared plus sine squared equals 1. And in order to keep cosine, so I would say that sine squared equals 1 minus cosine squared. Now then, let's come back to the original one. Cosine 2 of theta is cosine squared minus sine squared. Now cosine, keep it as it is. And the second one, which is sine, write instead of it 1 minus cosine squared of theta. And then here you have minus sign. Okay. Wait a minute, I make something wrong here. It's not supposed to be like this. Then, so it will be cosine squared minus 1 plus cosine squared of theta. Then let's arrange it. Cosine plus cosine is 2 cosine squared minus 1. This is a way here how to derive the third identity. So don't forget, in order to find cosine 2 theta, we have 3 identities. Cosine squared minus sine squared, 2 cosine squared minus 1, and 1 minus 2 sine squared. This, we will use them later on. But here now, let's see how can we derive them. Now, let's see here now, how can we use the double angle identity? In the previous lesson, I told you now, how can you find cosine? I told you now how to find cosine 120. We said that we can say it is cosine 90 plus 30. And we can say that it is cosine of 180 minus 60 by the difference identity or by the sum angle identity. So in order to find cosine of 120, I can find it from the unit circle. I can find it from the angle sum identity or from the difference angle identity. So I can say cosine of 120 is 90 plus 30, 180 minus 60, or we can say it is 2 times 60 by the double angle identity. I know cosine of 60, so I will use the double angle identity in order to find cosine of 120. So as I told you, these are 3 ways. Can you use it by this way, or by this way, or by this way in order to find cosine of 120. Let's now use the double angle identity. Now, cosine of 120 by the double angle, it's mean I will say in my mind, what is the angle that I multiplied by 2, I get 120, it's 60. Then I will ask myself, well, how can we find cosine 2 theta? Cosine 2 theta, if I want to find that, I will use one of the 3 identities. Let's use cosine squared of theta minus sine squared of theta. But by the way, this is theta and this is 2. So in order to find cosine of 120, I will say it's cosine squared of 60 minus sine squared of 60. Then let's remember, what is the cosine of 60? It is half. And what is the sine of 60? It's square root of 3 over 2. So cosine of 60 is half squared minus square root of 3 over 2, which is the sine of 60 squared. So it will be 1 over 2 squared means 1 over 4 minus square root of 3. Now, all of us know that. I will remind you here. If we have what is squared here distributed by the numerator and the denominator means it's 1. It will be 1 squared over 2 squared minus square root of 3 2 squared over 2 squared means it's 1 over 4 minus square root of 3 squared is 3 because it cancels it over 4. So it will be negative 2 over 4 or negative half. So cosine of 120 is negative half. If you use the angle sum, the difference angle, or the double angle, you will get the same answer. Is it clear?
Yes, teacher.
Yes.
Yes, teacher.
Let's take now another example here. Sine of 120. Now, sine of 120, as I told you, you can use any way. But since he told me, I want you to use the double angle identity, so I will say it is sine 2 times 60. So this was my theta, and this is 2. Now remember, in order to find sine 2 theta, we say that it is 2 cosine squared sine squared. Oh, not without squared. Right? Two cosine times sine. Now then, it's 2 times cosine of 60 times sine of 60. Means it's 2 times half times square root of 3 over 2. 2 cancel 2, so it will be square root of 3 over 2. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now from here, you can find, without determine that 120 is in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2, so it will be positive or negative. By solving it, you will get the answer. I mean, like here, 120, since it's in quadrant 2, so the sign must be positive. But in the previous one, we solved cosine, and as you remember, it was negative, because in quadrant 2, the cosine is negative. Let's solve now another example. Here, sine of 240 degree. Yes, Hanin, sine 240. How you solve it? Hanin?
Yes.
Yes, Hanin.
Can I solve it first alone?
Okay, yeah, I'm waiting you.
Okay.
And the second one, I'll give it to Habiba. You try to solve the second one. Now, from the previous two questions, remember that sine 120 is square root of 3 over 2, and cosine of 120 is negative half. Yes, honey, yeah. 240 is which angle that I multiply by 2, I get 240.
We can say, no, it's not.
240, if you multiply 2 by 120, you get 240.
Oh,
Okay?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
sine 2 theta is 2 sine theta cosine theta. This is my theta here. This is 2. So then it will be just a minute. 2. Now sine of 120 from here, it's square root of 3 over 2. And its cosine is negative half. So it will be negative 3, negative 1 times square root of 3. It's negative square root of 3 over 2. Is it right?
Yeah, I think I don't know, I did something wrong.
Okay.
Okay, teacher, thank you.
Yeah. Now, Habiba, can you help me to solve cosine 240?
Yes, teacher.
Yes, Habiba. Number 13, cosine 240. It's cosine of which angle times 2?
2 times 120.
Bravo, 2 times 120. Now, which identity you want to use to find cosine 2 theta?
Cosine squared.
Okay. Minus sine squared of theta. Bravo. Yeah. Then what is the cosine? Oh, what is the cosine squared? Oh, what is the cosine of 120?
200. What, teacher?
From here. Here you have to substitute cosine of 120. This is my theta. And this is 2. So it's cosine of theta. I mean cosine of 120.
It
Which
will
is
be
negative half
negative
from here.
2.
Aywa, squared. Minus. What is the sine of 120? Square root of 3 over 2 squared.
Yeah.
So it will be 1 over 4 minus 3 over 4, which is negative 2 over 4 or negative half. So the cosine of 240 degree will be negative half. Do you have any question?
Teacher, like here you make cosine squared times 120. Like the delta will be 120.
Where? Here, yeah. You have to think, what is the angle? Let's multiply it by 2, I get 240. It was 120. So I will use the cosine and sine of 120 in order to find cosine of 240.
Teacher, what about the 2?
What to do? Miss?
The 2 times
Cosine
120.
2 theta is cosine squared minus sine squared. This is the formula.
Because of that you make it 2
So
times 120.
here, this theta, I will substitute it here and here.
Yes, okay, teacher. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have any question?
Teacher, it doesn't matter which equation did we choose.
Oh, yeah. And if you use any of them, you will get the same answer.
Okay. Okay, teacher, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye. We will continue in the last period, okay?
Teacher, have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Thank you so much.